Okay, Jeff, why don't you start with some information first? Tell us about growing up and where you grew up at.
Okay, well, I was born and raised in San Diego, California. It was a nice place to grow up in the 70s and in the 80s. I moved away from there in the mid-90s, and since then I've been kind of floundering and moving here and
So
there.
you're also a San Diego kid. But you
Yeah.
and, as far as you know, you and Elaine's paths never crossed till much later.
Came real close to
Couple
crossing.
times.
Yeah. We actually lived blocks from each other, and she went to the same school as my ex-wife at the same time as my ex-wife, and so we really almost came in contact.
Almost, but
Yeah.
never quite. Yeah. Why don't you tell us about your childhood? Tell us about your mom.
My mom, she had me when she was young. She was 16 years old when she got pregnant. She dropped out of school. My dad went to Vietnam, and when he came back, there was turmoil in the marriage, and they ended up divorcing. And my mom met my dad that adopted me when I was 4. They married. So I guess when I was 3, somewhere around there. They got married, and then where do I go from there?
And you've known him almost all your life, so that's
he's,
kind of your
he's
dad.
been my dad that raised me, and he's still in my life. I'm close to my dad.
Yeah.
So
And tell us about your extended family. You said you hung out with your aunts and uncles a lot.
yeah, I did. When my mom and dad, my biological dad, when they split up, we moved in with my grandma, and my aunts and uncles were all there. So I got close to my aunts and uncles, and my aunts and uncles, as I grew up and got a little bit older, were involved in drug and alcohol use, and they had, they had a lot of desert toys, 4-wheel drive trucks, and they were all young and having fun, and that was kind of like my role model. That was what I saw going on, and then
You saw the fun, you saw the
Yeah,
drugs,
I
you
saw
saw
the
the
fun, right.
alcohol.
right, and they didn't have any problems in their lives. They just seemed so carefree, go lucky, happy, and
From the perspective of a child.
from me, right, from what I
Yeah.
saw, right.
From what you saw, it was all great and dandy.
Yep.
Yeah. But you were struggling as a kid. Tell us about you as you were growing up and what your teachers thought of you.
So I was a pretty rebellious kid. None of my teachers, so I'm an artist today, and even my art teacher, she couldn't stand me. I got kicked out of art class. So most of my teachers had problems with me. I was rebellious. Even Little League, I got into organized sports, and I'd stand out in the field and I'm watching the butterflies and the ball's going by. So my coaches didn't like me. I had problems with authority. I wanted to do my own thing. When I was 4 years old, I remember, my mom just told me this story the other night. She stuck me in my room to punish me one night, and I saw my friends playing outside. I'm 4 years old, and I broke the screen and went out the window. I'm out of here. So that was kind of like the kind of kid I was. I was rebellious, and I got into a lot of trouble.
So your teachers actually
Sent me
diagnosed you unofficially. They thought you were ADHD.
Absolutely, yeah, they thought that, but they sent
To
me.
keep you over here. You and I are
I keep
wanderers. We like to
drifting,
talk
right. I'm
as
drifting.
move as we talk.
So yeah, my teacher sent me to. They recommended I go to a school psychologist, and I remember playing with the sandbox there. It was really cool. They had a sandbox indoors, and the only 2 things that I remember there was a sandbox and a punching bag. So they let me, just do my own thing, do whatever you want to do. And she observed me, and at the end of, I guess, going there for a little while, they just told my mom that I was just a typical kid. I'm just a typical boy. That's all there was to it. So they recommended that they cut sugar out of my diet, and that didn't go real
That
well.
just backfired worse.
Yeah, I was irritable. I didn't.
How cranky would you be if someone cut sugar out of your diet, right?
Yeah, I was 9 years old, so no more sugar. Okay.
Yeah, right.
Anyways, so it was. I had a rocky kind of. As a kid, it was kind of rocky.
And you probably felt a little alone, like no one got you. No one understood what was going on. And no one was really there for you, at least
Yeah,
with the teachers.
to a point, right.
Yeah.
I did, my mom did take me to Sunday school, or,
Yeah,
Sunday school when
Sunday
I was a
school,
kid.
yeah.
There's a little church at the end of the block. And that put God and Jesus in my mind. So I always knew that he was there. But I didn't grow up in a religious house. She didn't actually go to church while I was growing up. And so
It was almost more like babysitting, like go to Sunday school.
sort of. I mean, I think she wanted to put that in,
Instill it
as
in
a
your mind.
foundation, right?
Good.
Because she believed in God, but she just didn't. She was searching too.
Right.
So.
Now, I've spent years educating parents that when we educate our kids about drugs, to not only focus on the bad things, because then when a young child tries the drug and then experiences the quote-unquote good things of the drug, they're like, oh, wow, my parents are totally wrong. You kind of had that in your first experience with marijuana. You had some thoughts as you were trying it, like, what?
Right, like that it couldn't be as bad as they were saying it was, because it was, I was having fun. I mean, I'm cracking up laughing, and it just seemed like, what's the harm here, like, what, I want to eat ice cream, so what, And so I kind of when they put everything together, I kind of had an idea of maybe they're lying about, or not lying so much, but, I'm being misled about these other drugs like cocaine, meth, heroin.
Right, when we only hear all the
Heroin.
bad things, and then you try it and you're like, well, I didn't have any of those bad things. What else can I try?
They really slammed that into my mind, though, when I was a kid. Heroin, they showed me pictures of what happens. And I have an aversion to needles anyways, so I was always afraid of that. I never dabbled in that at all. So.
Yeah. So you said that your first thought while you tried marijuana was, it's not that bad.
Right.
Yeah. But you said that it planted seeds in your life, that at the time you weren't paying attention to the consequences, but now you can look back and see how bad that was for your life.
Right. Yeah, it did. It took me down a dark path. Really, alcohol was really the first drug that I started with, and then marijuana.
Yeah. And then someday you were offered some meth. What was going through your mind at that time?
So I was actually a teenager, and it wasn't that that I had any friends that were doing it regularly, but all of a sudden, one of my friends, it just came up, like, hey, do you want to do some? And they were doing it, and so I made this decision in my mind. Like, I remember looking at it and thinking, wow, I'm kind of going down a dark road here, like I know better. And it's almost like you look at it and you're thinking, if I do this, it's almost like there's no going back. And I know the dangers, and I'm thinking, wow, this could actually kill me. Like, I've heard this kills people, right? So, but I did it. And then it was extremely enticing drug. It just gives you like this Superman kind of feeling, racing thoughts. It really just made me feel good, like invincible almost. You're up for 2-3 days at a time, and you're just having fun.
Key phrase for our young people is it made you feel that way, but it didn't make you that way.
But it was ultimately destructive,
Yeah.
right? There's a bad crash, there's a bad burn.
Right. You said the
crash
first
and
time
burn.
you were trying it, your consciousness was like screaming at you, no,
Exactly.
no.
Yeah, it was totally. And I made a bad decision.
So you're already rebellious, already didn't care in school. Now you were on drugs and alcohol. And what decision about school did you make when you were a teenager?
The day I turned 16, that was when you could legally drop out of school. I just never went back. I decided it wasn't working out. I wasn't having fun there. I wasn't involved in any kind of activities. All I was just going through the motions. But I went. I never really ditched school. I don't know why I didn't ditch school, looking back. I didn't enjoy it. But I went. And so I just couldn't wait to get out of there, though. Because I did have friends that were a little bit older, and I knew what they were doing during the day. They were hanging out, riding their bikes, doing what they wanted to do. And that's where I wanted to be. I wanted to be out on the street with my friends. So I dropped out of school.
Dropped out of school, and for a year you said your parents kind of laid back, but then they gave you an ultimatum.
Yeah, there was pressure during that year, here and there. But at the end of a year, my dad So I had hair that was like down to here, and I was always dressed in metal garb, spikes, stuff like that. I raced BMX bikes and rode BMX bikes. So at the end of a year, he told me, you need to cut your hair and get a job, or you can hit the bricks.
So then you went and got a job.
I was around 17.
Yeah, you went and worked at McDonald's. How long did that job last?
A day.
You told me
2 hours.
2 hours.
About 2 hours, yeah. So the basement had flooded, and they gave me a broom, or not a broom, but a squeegee and a mop, and put me to work in the basement because they told me to keep pushing the water towards this drain. And then when I was upstairs too, I didn't really enjoy doing what I was doing up there. All these timers going off, and it's time to flip these and do this, and then the register was kind of confusing to me. So I kind of had it in my mind already. This isn't for me. And then they put me down there, and the guy took off. And so I was down there for about 15 minutes, and the water just kept coming and coming and coming. And I was like, forget it. That's it. I'm out of here. And I just took off. I went home.
So
I didn't say a word to him. No, I just left. Yeah, I left.
Yeah. And then you eventually worked over at the bowling alley.
Yeah, so I already knew that it was a possibility that I was going to start working at the bowling alley. And so I pursued that, and within about a week to 2 weeks, I started working at the bowling alley as a customer service kid, running around, getting the dead woods down the lanes, cleaning ashtrays, dumping drinks, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Probably a lot of fun. You probably got to bowl a lot, but you were surrounded by a bad environment.
Right.
What were some of the things going on at the bowling alley?
So I met a lot of people there. I had a lot of friends, and my family. I kind of grew up in bowling alleys because my family bowled, and they all hung out in bowling alleys. My aunts and uncles hung out in bowling alleys when I was a kid and stuff. And excuse me. So yeah, there was bad influences there. There was a lot of drugs and alcohol in the bowling alley. A lot of after parties, like after we'd close, a lot of parties going on, all night bowling. And it was all enticing, and it was all fun at the time.
Because you didn't generally see lives falling apart at the bowling alley. You saw the fun at the bowling alley.
Exactly. I couldn't see past that day, actually.
Yeah.
I couldn't see past right now,
Yeah.
at that moment,
So you were heading on it, you were down the dark road at this point. Life was kind of getting really fragile. You were getting heavier to drugs and alcohol and into the heavy metal scene. But then your mom somehow flipped on a channel and invited you to start watching a channel with her. What channel was that?
So my mom started watching 3ABN.
Which, if you don't know, is an Adventist channel, on cable and satellite around the world.
Right. She was, me and her were both night people. We slept days and were up all night, all the time. And she was watching it at night. It was on all night long, so she started watching it. And she started watching Amazing Facts with Doug Batchelor. And then there was a guy named Dane Griffin, and he had a show that was called Looking Back to the Future. And
Both were prophecy related.
right, and It Is Written. She was watching that. So she started telling me about it, and I actually started watching it with her. And it really, really made sense to me. I started learning about prophecy. And, I was kind of like a show-me kind of person. So when I started learning about prophecy, and then I started comparing it to history and things that had happened in prophecy, and then I found out that that was true. So it made me believe in the Bible. It made me believe that all of it had to be true. If that's true, it's probably all true.
Sure.
Right? I mean, how could they have known?
If the prophecies are true, the promises are true.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I didn't fully understand the promises.
So you were now studying your Bible.
Right.
You were coming to know that the Bible was truth, that prophecy was true, that promises were true, and this totally cures you of drugs and alcohol, and testimony's over.
No.
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 So how would you study prophecy? What would you do first?
Well, for a while I started kind of cleaning myself up, but like I said, I didn't really understand the promises, and I didn't understand love so much, and so I really struggled with my will. I was always taking back my will, and
your desires, your lusts of the flesh. You were always taking it back and doing what you wanted.
Right, and I did the promises were there that he would never leave us nor forsake us, and that he was always never changing. And so, in taking back my will, part of the reason I did that was because I was complacent, because I thought he'll be there. I can do what I want now, and he'll just be there. So.
And it's amazing, as bad, as dangerous, as even sinful as that thought is, he still didn't leave you, did he?
Right. Nope, he didn't.
It's amazing.
No, he was always there. So,
yeah.
And then I was pretty prideful. So I always, I kept God on the back burner, knowing that he was going to be there. And so I came to like a lot of understanding about prophecy and everything. And
so God was on the back burner, but studying the Bible was not. You were still studying the Bible.
Right, and so what I was doing was the same way that people cram for college exams using amphetamines. I was using amphetamines and studying the Bible. And
so you would do drugs, study the Bible for
absolutely
hours and hours or days without needing sleep because you were hopped up on drugs.
All night long, studying the Bible. And, I was learning.
Yeah.
At an exponential rate. I was really learning a lot. And but I wasn't living it. I wasn't living what I was learning. I was just learning.
It wasn't Jesus-centric. It wasn't because you were drawing a closer walk with God. It was because you were learning something interesting.
I was gaining knowledge, but I didn't have the wisdom because my pride wasn't allowing me to pray, for one. I struggled with prayer. Only recently did I start really praying and really understanding that aspect of it. So.
And because of your nightlife, you started to want to go to church, but because you would work at night, you'd be up all night, you'd be studying all night, you'd be doing drugs all night, you wanted to crash out on Saturday mornings. So what would you do in order to stay awake at church?
I'd actually do drugs before I went to church.
You do drugs to keep yourself awake so you could hang in there at church.
I'd go to church high at times, yeah. And my conscience, the Spirit was there. But I've heard before that drugs and alcohol will block that communication with God. It puts it jams the signal.
Numbs it, yeah.
Right, so I wasn't actually hearing anything good, really. I was just doing what I wanted, just still with my will.
Yeah.
So.
And you said that studying the Bible, going to church, but also still doing drugs and alcohol had a lot of effects on your emotional side and your mental side. What was going on?
Right, so I knew that what I was doing was wrong, so I was living with a lot of fear and a lot of anxiety. So I knew about, end-time prophecies and things of that nature, and so every time there was an eclipse or something going on, I'm freaking out. Like I'm scared out of my mind because I know that I'm not right with God. I just knew that.
Not that necessarily a full moon is a sign of anything, but
I'm just
you were
saying
taking it as like
I'm just saying
any natural sign God was coming all of a sudden.
Well, when I
was
reading things and things that would happen, and so I'd know that the moon would turn as red as sackcloth, and
Matthew 24.
Right, and the
stars
sun
would fall and the sun would disappear.
Or it's just either way, one way or another. So when things would happen, that would naturally occurring things
like an eclipse or whatever.
Right, it would always spark my interest, and I would start to actually have panic attacks.
Right. Thinking Jesus is coming and I'm a drug dealer and I'm not ready.
And not knowing how to make the changes that I needed to make. So.
But, and church, if there's a lesson right now in this part of the story to learn is how easy it is to go through the motions as a Christian, as a church member, without really loving God. Because you then became an evangelist, not quite doing sermons and stuff, but you went to your neighbor, Cale, and you started studying the Bible with him. What happened to Cale?
So he lived next door to me, and I actually started studying with him, and him and I were doing drugs together occasionally, and I started doing the same thing with him. I started doing drugs and studying, and he actually got into it. And then he set the drugs down, as far as I know. He got clean, he got sober, and started going to church. So through all of that, what was going on, God was able to use me to bring somebody else to him, which was kind of really cool.
It's amazing, isn't
Yeah,
it?
it was
so
awesome.
we see the sin of man. You were doing all this bad stuff, and your life was falling apart, and you were paranoid. But God promised to never leave you, and He was there
Right.
and using you. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Wow. And as far as you haven't talked to Kel in a long time, but as far as the last time he was clean, sober, and a church member.
Yeah, I saw him one time, and yeah, that's what was going on with him. And it was
Wow.
the only reason I saw him was because I had left a fern behind, because him and I used to garden together, and he was taking care of this staghorn fern for me that got to be out of control. It was so big, I don't know how he got it to my mom's house, but he brought it and dropped it off, and that was when I saw him.
Wow.
So.
Around that time, there were a lot of ladies in and out of your life, but then a young lady named Jennifer caught your attention, and how was that relationship for you?
It was always kind of, well, it had good times and bad times, but at times it was really volatile.
Volatile is the word you use.
Yeah, so we actually ended up getting married, but we went, so I met her when I was like 17, and we would go like 2-3 years on, 2 years off, 3 years on, 2 years off, and then the third time, we ended up having my son Jacob, and who's 21 now. Anyways, we had him, and we had our house, we had assets, we had things, and so the third time when we split up, we didn't get back together. It was over.
Before that third one, you had actually moved to Washington to get away, to start fresh. You were sober.
Right.
You were volunteering for the fire department, and she came to you, and that's when you guys got married, and then things
Right.
again fell apart.
Yeah,
for you.
after I moved her up there, within 3 months or so, she was pregnant, and then so we got married right away, or within a month or so, a couple months, and
Yeah.
right, and then we moved back to San Diego when Jacob was around 6 months.
Yeah.
Or around a year old, actually, I think.
And eventually, during that time together, life again got really dark, really bad, really stressful, and you went to a bar one night. What happened at the bar?
Yeah, so I started drinking again, and it was escalating, and then going back just a little bit, I tried going to AA and things like that, and it wasn't. I was staying sober, and I started going to marriage counseling and stuff. Anyways, yeah, she wanted to go out to the bar and invited me, and she actually gave me a pass to drink one night. She says, "Oh, you can drink this one night." Well, it's in my mind, it's like a last hurrah. It's like, okay, good, I get to drink tonight, right? So, and I did. I turned it up. A lot, yeah. We were drinking in the van. We were drinking in the bar, and I ended up getting in a fight with the bathroom attendant. Yeah, because the bathroom was broken, and I didn't think that was fair, so I ended up getting in a fight with him because, whatever, I was drunk.
Yeah,
I was
you
out of
got
my
kicked
mind.
out of the bar. You were realizing that you had fallen back to your old ways.
Right,
Life was stressful, marriage was stressful, now alcohol's back in the picture.
right.
And you ended up going up to a ledge. What were you planning on doing?
The parking garage that we were parked in, our cars were parked there, and we were going back to the car, and I was a wreck. In my mind, my life was a total shambles, and there was a lot of pain because I knew my marriage was falling apart. I knew I was going to lose my family. So there was a lot of pain, and at that same time, my parents were going through a divorce. So I had that too on my plate, and I ended up getting on the ledge in the parking garage, and I was just thinking how easy it would be just to step off and it would be over. And
By the grace of God, He sent a friend to you.
Yeah, he sent my friend Brian to me, that was with us anyways. He ended up talking me down, and he told me, that little boy that you have needs you. And that's what did it. I said, yeah, you're right. So I got down, and we went home, and the next morning, I woke up and there was a note from my wife that said, I'm going to church, and she never came back. That was it. She was gone.
Marriage was over.
It was over.
Yeah. And that sent you into you were already depressed, stressed,
I was
already in a dark place, and this sent you even lower.
extremely depressed. Extremely depressed,
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
What were some of the ways you coped with the darkness?
So I started, again, I ramped it up with the drug and alcohol use. I was just numbing myself.
Yeah, it didn't fix anything, it just numbed it.
Yeah, so all my bills were behind. Everything was, falling apart. My whole life was falling apart, and yeah, so I started using meth, and I started using a lot. So,
And Jacob was kind of a shared custody back and forth between your
right,
homes.
it was 50-50 physical and legal custody.
Would you clean up when he was at home?
No, I was fully
All in with drugs.
all in, yeah.
So he
even
was about 6 at
in the
this time,
times when
right?
I had him, I would try to, yeah, and a lot of times that would result in my nodding, passing out, and I'd be at my mom's or something, and I'd end up falling asleep and not spending time with him.
So that was how you were coping, either high or asleep.
Mhm.
Yeah. And one day, Jennifer showed up and basically was taking Jacob away for good.
So I lost my house, and I was living in a camper. I lived in that camper for about a year and a half on my grandma's property. And yeah, so I didn't really have a place to have him to stay with me overnight. And Jennifer came to get him one day, and she was, taking him by the hand and leading him down the driveway, and he was crying, saying how he wanted to stay with his dad.
Yeah.
And it hurt real bad. I mean,
Yeah. I'm sure.
I was a mess, and seeing him, screaming and crying, saying that he wanted to stay with me, and I wasn't there for him. I couldn't step up and have him in my life that way. I couldn't give him quality time.
And you said that moment made you fall again, but this time it was because you fell to your knees.
Right. So yeah, after he left, I went inside the camper, and I got on my knees, and I think it was, 2 hours, 3 hours, I don't know how long. It felt like a long time. I just poured it all out to God. I kept, I was weeping, like uncontrollably, and just letting him know, I can't do this. I'm a mess. I'm just, I don't know how to do it. I don't know how to live. And asked him for help.
And then the next day or two, you got an answer to prayer. What did Grandma? I was going to say, what did she ask you? But she kind of told you.
Yeah. So, like I said, I was living on her property, and she came home from church. Wherever she was going to church, it was somewhere near Balboa Park in San Diego, I think. Anyways, she had a pamphlet from Teen Challenge. They had come to her church, and
For anyone who doesn't know Teen Challenge, give us a 2-sentence kind of synopsis of what they do.
it's a Christian discipleship and drug rehab program.
And you weren't a teen, so they're not
Right,
just
so
for
they're
teens.
they're called Teen Challenge, but it's for men. But they also have a men or a women's, it's
place, yeah.
inpatient. But there's no locks on the doors. You can walk out of there anytime if you want to.
So it wasn't
So-
court ordered,
Right? It wasn't
but
court
Grandma
ordered.
ordered.
Through all the messes that I made, I never got in trouble with the law, and that's a miracle. That's God was there through. I'm telling you, as hard as I tried to get in trouble, God kept me out of trouble. And that's the truth. He really did. I mean, I can only attribute it to God, because there was times when I was actually holding drugs, and the police were right there, and they didn't find them.
Wow. So you go to Teen Challenge, and while it was a good wake-up call, it actually didn't quite work out too long. How long were
Right.
you there?
10 days.
10
So
days.
I was there for 10 days, and it gave me a taste of being incarcerated or institutionalized. And like I said, I'd never been in trouble, so that didn't set well with me. I didn't. Again, I like
You didn't like the boundaries, the
right, the
rules.
same way that I I always took back my will. It was part of the reason was because I like doing what I like to do, and I didn't like being in there. So,
Yeah.
and I didn't share the beliefs, their same beliefs, their core beliefs with them. So I had the foundation from the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and they actually had taken me to a Pentecostal church that was a Filipino Pentecostal church. So they were actually, I didn't speak the same language. Part of their sermon, or part of their service was in or whatever language you told me.
Tagalog, yeah.
Right, they were speaking another language, and then also they were speaking in tongues, which I'd never seen before. I had never witnessed that personally. And then they were, putting hands on
See, I
each
grew up
other.
around that, so it's like second nature to see it, and I'm comfortable around that group.
Right.
But you had never seen it, so it was different.
So
for you.
it sort of, it struck me as sort of odd, right? So within a couple of days, I started getting in trouble in that program. I did one thing was we're supposed to shave twice a day, and I skipped shaving one time because I was in a rush to get to a class. Yeah, huge rebellion, right? So they approached me, and somehow they knew. And I was the last guy in the showers. There was nobody around, and I said, man, I got to get to this class or I'm going to get in trouble. I'm throwing my stuff in the bag and going. And so
it was like they were right on you like that.
later that night, right, one of the guys that was, they're like interns. Anyways, he had come, and he approached me and told me, hey, what's up? You didn't shave, right? I'm like, how do you know? Like, it takes a week for this to grow in, right? So anyways, I denied it. But he knew somehow that I didn't shave. And so they were going to punish me. And part of their punishment was they wouldn't let you speak. Sometimes for 2 days, sometimes for a whole week. You couldn't speak to anybody. Except for choir. You could go to choir and you could talk or, sing. But that was it.
So, long story short, 10 days in, you take off, but
I took off.
this kick in the tail, this reminder, this love of grandma actually cleaned you up for about 60 days or so, you said, about 2 months.
Yeah, it got me started.
You were working, things going great. You were walking home from work, and what did the devil put in your path?
Yeah, so I was about 2 days away from getting a 60-day token. I had gone into the NA program because I knew about
Narcotics Anonymous, yeah.
Narcotics Anonymous, and I was living in a sober living place. I checked myself into this place. And with the help of my mom, she started paying my rent there so that I could get clean. And yeah, so I was about to take my 60-day token, and I'm walking home from work. I'd gotten off the bus, and it was about 4 blocks home. And I'm walking, and I remember it was down this hill and up a hill, and I'm watching these 2 kids walk in front of me with backpacks, students, and they walked right over it. And
Almost as if they didn't even see.
they didn't see it because
The devil had it for you.
Because it hit my eye because I knew what it was. Maybe they saw it but didn't know what it was. There was a bag with meth in it, and it was about half full. So it was enough that I grabbed it, and I put it in my sock drawer. And I should have just thrown it away, right? But I put it in my sock drawer, and then that weekend, my roommate, because we shared rooms, and that was part of keeping an eye on each other. He was gone. He went and stayed with his family, and I got high.
Look at that timing. I mean, the devil knew exactly when to hit you. He put it there on the street, right in front of you, at a weekend where you're going to be alone in the room.
And I was just about to celebrate my 60 days, and
Yeah.
and we were going to go out for dinner for it and all this stuff. My roommates were going to take me out, and I stumbled again.
Yeah. And then sometime later, you kind of cleaned up again. This roller coaster you were on, cleaned up again, and were just really feeling like you wanted some drugs, and you prayed, but not to the right power.
Right. Oh, yeah. So this was actually before I went to that sober living, or before I went to Teen Challenge.
Okay.
So I was scheduled to go in there, and I was totally out of money. I was hungry. I was on my bike, and I'm riding down El Cajon Boulevard in San Diego at night. It's a main street that goes through the whole city, kind of like our main street, but a lot longer and a lot bigger. Anyways,
Big city living, yeah.
big city, right? And I'm going through alleys and stuff, and I'm scanning the ground, and I'm looking for anything. Like when you're out in the middle of the night, I'm looking for money or drugs or anything
Food,
I can find.
anything
I can find, and I start talking out loud, and I actually make an audible deal with the devil to give me, if he'll give me $100.
You specifically said $100.
I said $100. I need $100. I want to get a burrito. I want to get a sack of drugs, and I'd like to get a 12-pack of beer.
Okay, so we have had some technical audio issues, and so we've come back to finish up this story. And so if you're watching online and you notice that the flowers are gone or things are different, they are different. We're going to fix this right now. So where we were in this story is that you had prayed to Satan, asked for $100 so you could buy a burrito, a sack of dope, and a 12-pack of beer. And then what?
Well, then, so that night, I ended up just going back to the house. Nothing happened. I didn't find anything. I just ended up going back to where I was staying with my aunt and uncle. And I went to sleep. And the next morning, I got in touch with Teen Challenge, and they told me when I came, because I was on a schedule to go into there.
Right.
It was the Christian discipleship and rehab program. I was going in there, and so they told me I need to bring socks and toilet paper. Right, so
definitely don't want to forget toilet paper.
Right, like I said, I think there was a shortage of toilet paper there at Teen Challenge, or for whatever reason they wanted me to bring toilet paper. So I didn't have any money, so I went and talked to my dad and asked him. He lived next to a Walmart. He still lives there, but I went and asked him if he could take me to Walmart and buy me a package of socks and toilet paper to take to Teen Challenge. Because they requested that I do so. And so he said, well, I don't really feel like going anywhere. And he said, let me get you some money. He went into his wallet and he handed me a $100 bill.
$100 bill, just what you had asked for.
Right, and it was an uh-oh moment at that time, because I'd remembered what I'd said the night before. And my dad would have never given me $100.
Because at that point, you'd burned bridges, you'd lied, and people knew what you were doing, who you were.
I had confessed that I had a drug problem. I was telling, and so he didn't trust me.
They were not gonna. Yeah, I've been around families like that. Not to give money to certain people, and so
right.
He never would have given you money. And here it was,
$100 bill.
$100 bill for you.
So I went and got my toilet paper and my socks, and I still had a lot of change. I had probably $85 left over, and I went and ended up buying drugs and alcohol, and that's what happened. And I think I ended up getting my burrito too.
Ended up getting that burrito.
Yeah.
Good. So Satan always had these ways. That's why we've shared these stories of what happened at Albertsons and what was going on the sidewalk and this $100. He always found a way to get involved. Even when you turned your back to Satan and you cleaned up and you did the right thing, he found ways to wiggle through.
Right, to tempt me.
To tempt you, right? He is as the Bible says, a lion who's seeking to devour.
Right.
He was always on your back. So that thought stayed with you over time, that you had sold your soul to the devil. You were curious and wondering, and so you reached out to Pastor Boinka about that.
Right, I talked to Julio. Elaine and I this was down the road a couple years, I think. Me and Elaine were talking to Julio, and he was helping us and counseling us. And so I remembered that I had done that, and I asked him. I told him exactly what I said, and he told me, he said, Jeffrey, you don't need to worry. He said, that soul never belonged to you in the first place to sell to him.
Life belongs to God.
Right.
Death is the only thing that belongs to Satan, so it wasn't yours to
right.
give
He said
your life.
Your soul doesn't belong to, right.
Yeah, God is the owner of all life. So that's beautiful. So that gave you a better peace that
it gave me hope.
God again had not given up on you, even though, the words to Satan, give me $100, I'll give it, that's pretty powerful.
Right.
that's still, even though it's not yours to give, that shows where your heart was at that moment and what was going on in life. And to know that even if you gave you pledged your eternity to Satan, God can still work.
Yep.
He did not quit on you.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah, you told me that your life at this point was very dangerous. You were walking a very narrow path, and God kept you balanced. God kept you balanced. So you ended up at Sober Living.
Right.
What was going on over there?
So I checked. So when I left, so I think I talked about that I left Teen Challenge because I didn't share their core beliefs,
Yeah.
and I was struggling. I was starting to get into trouble there. So yeah, I left there and I went to the NA program. I was staying with my aunt and uncle, and right down the street from where they lived, they were having meetings. I had remembered that place because I'd been to the meeting with a friend of mine that was court ordered to go there before. And somebody at that meeting told me, hey, I know a sober living place that has a bed available right now. So I talked to my mom and asked her, hey, can you get me into this place? And she helped me move into there financially and whatnot. And I was really trying to stay sober. About, I'd say 50 days later, I'm getting ready to take my 60-day token and in 10 days or so. And then I went and had dental work done. And they prescribed me painkillers. So I started taking the painkillers, and those kind of made me a little loopy and lowered my inhibitions and whatnot. And then I'm walking home from work one day, and
that's a story about finding stuff on the sidewalk.
finding the drugs on the sidewalk, right?
Yeah. So you were crashing out again.
So then I ended up using again at the Sober Living. The manager there was ill, so he was gone a lot. So we weren't exactly supervised. So,
Yeah. And then you're walking home one day, friends are over there playing video games, and you walk in and there's a stranger.
Right,
Someone you kind of knew, but you hadn't technically met. Someone strange sitting on your bed.
I'd seen her at the, at the place where we went for meetings. She actually lived there, right? It was another place that was a sober living place. And it was called Homestretch on El Cajon Boulevard in San Diego. And anyways, I come in, and my roommates are all playing video games, and they've got a little crowd of people there, the people that they had met at Homestretch. And yeah, she was laying in my bed.
Yep. And who
when
was
I came
that?
in. That was
Elaine.
Elaine. Yeah.
So we've now heard Elaine's story of growing up and up to meeting you. We've now heard your story and coming to the point where you met Elaine. And then in part 3, we're going to hear how God continued to work with you guys in a relationship. And that's going to have its ups and downs. We're going to hear some pretty incredible stories. I can't wait to have people hear your 3ABN test. That's an interesting part of the story. And so from there, we'll see how God brought you out of that lifestyle and brought you into the newness of life. It's amazing.
Right.
Yeah. Let's pray. Father, thank you so much for that promise that you are with us. You never leave us. And even when we're turning our backs, Lord, you just stay there so peaceful, so patient, so kind. Thank you for your grace, Lord. Thank you for the promise of the newness of life. Help us to walk in it, Lord. Maybe there's someone listening who is struggling right now, someone who needs to be lifted up out of that darkness, Father. We claim right now victory in Jesus' name, that they will have the same victory that Jeff and Elaine have experienced, Lord. In Jesus' precious name, amen.